Hi there, and welcome back to Tyler and myself as we look at some new things this year. And one of these topics that we're going to be focusing in on is archaeology, history, and the Bible. We did a little of this last year, and we think it might be of even more interest this year. So please come and join us as we go through a number of different video times with considering and talking about some important aspects, especially some new and exciting things that are taking place as we try to fit together the pieces and better understand what the revelation of God is in the Old Testament and how it fits in the world of the Old Testament, what we know about the history, what we know about the archaeology. So come join us. What is the most exciting thing that happened in 2023? Well, I'm sure if you are a person who is interested in news or in events or in personal aspects of your life, there's all kinds of things going on that you could identify. Today, Tyler and I are here to talk about what we think is one of the very most exciting archaeological finds that has a direct relationship to the Bible. And I have been listening, Tyler, in the last couple of weeks to a number of different attempts to lay out what different people think as some of the most important archaeology, Bible finds that they've had. There have been a lot of interesting things, but I haven't heard the thing that we're going to be looking at today. So I think it's kind of interesting and kind of fun that we get to examine this piece. This is a little bit more distant from Israel, but nevertheless right near and right by there. So we're going to take some minutes today to examine what was life like in the time of what the Bible places Abram and Sarah and their family. How and what was their religion, that they grew up with, and what was their whole picture in terms of what we know about that. And so that's what the find that we're going to be looking at enables us to do. So does that sound good?
Sounds great. In fact, I had a friend named Josh just on Saturday ask me, how can we trust the Bible? And I gave him really good reasons to trust the New Testament. And it feels like every time people ask me about the Old Testament, I just say, Jewish scholars hand us down the Masoretic text. It's really trustworthy, but I really don't have much to say about it. It's so much further removed. So I'm excited because I don't know how to help people like Josh know the details of why we can trust the account of the Old Testament.
Yeah, there's so much there, and there's a lot of discussion about it. And I know that because on my website, oldtestamentquestions.com, I often get questions like that, and then people ask a specific area or something like that, and many of those now are up on that site. But this will be an actual archaeological find that helps us to better understand it. So we've titled this Worshipping with Abraham. New Amorite texts show the language and religion of Abraham and Sarah and their family. And I think that, to me, is really, really neat. So behind us is a picture of the Euphrates River. And we're looking south as it moves down within a few miles of where it flows from what is today the modern state of Syria into Iraq. But in ancient times, that takes us right down to Babylon. And it was along this route that a lot of what we read about of Abraham and his family, a lot of their activities, and I think maybe even business, was along that. But today in particular, we want to look at some texts that were found there. And two very important and very competent scholars, Andrew George and Manfred Krebernick, have published it in January of 2023, so it slips right in there into our most important find, something called Two Remarkable Vocabularies, Amorite Akkadian Bilinguals. And these were published in a French journal and first appeared in 2023. Now, what's a bilingual? Well, in the ancient world, people spoke and read a variety of different languages. And around the time of Abram, which maybe is the 19th century BC or
Wow.
before that or after that, Abram and Sarah, two very popular languages were what we might call Amorite, which is actually a collection of different dialects and languages, out of which and from which would come Hebrew and other related languages that we use in the Old Testament. And then there's also a better known script called Akkadian in general and language. And that language breaks down into Babylonian and Assyrian. And at this time, in the time of Abram, we have old Babylonian. So these texts were published in that.
So the two texts were Amorite and Akkadian, is that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Actually, what they are is it's almost like what you might have today if you can envision, for example, just take as an example, English on one side of a two-column text or page, and Akkadian on the other side.
Okay.
Or German for a modern language, or French, or whatever. So on the one side would be the word or words or phrases in English, and on the other side, the other language. And there would be a translation, one to the other.
And both these languages split off into many other languages. For example, Amorite became what we know now as Hebrew. Is that right?
Yeah, Amorite is they call it by the term precursor. It's the earlier form. And some of these texts may be very similar to what comes into Hebrew.
Okay.
Others may go in a slightly different direction, but they're all in a family of what you might call dialects.
Sure. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what we have. And when we look at the script and what they call the ductus, which is the actual way in which some people like to think of cuneiform as a sort of chicken scratches.
Yeah, it does kind of look like that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. The way in which those are inserted into the clay with the stylus, we find that the script is very much Old Babylonian, of which probably the most famous Old Babylonian guy was King Hammurabi, who produced a collection of laws in the 18th century BC, which are in Old Babylonian and are famous even to this day. And then the ductus, the way it's just the signs themselves are drawn, comes from South Babylonia, from south of Babylon and in that area. So farther on down the Euphrates River there. What's interesting is these are two tablets that are from private collections. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they come from two different private collections. But the form of the script, like you might say, the style of your handwriting, if you were to write different letters and different things like that to different people, but they collected them later, they would see that the style of that handwriting was similar and unique to you. Everyone has their own slightly different style, but these are so similar that some people think that these are actually written by the same scribe or scribes.
Wow.
So the first tablet, tablet 1, is a text that was open to study formerly at Cornell University here in the States, and it was seen by one of the two authors who published the text. And then it was transferred into New York City in a private collection, but not before photos were taken of it using a certain ammonium chloride method by someone named David Owen, another scholar who has taught at Cornell and is a well-known cuneiformist. And the curator of the collection had a video conference with Andrew George, and they discussed this material. And then the second tablet, tablet number 2, it is not found in the States. It is in a private collection in London. And there again, using what's called an ammonium chloride method, David Owen took photographs of it.
Hmm.
And so it's a kind of interesting way this was done. They don't have firsthand examination, but they do have these tablets, and that provides us with a bit of an understanding. And as I said, quite exciting
Yeah.
in their own way. Both of these tablets, if you look carefully at them, are in fact two columns.
Hmm.
They're both of the same kind of script, but the language that the script has is different. It's like you might have the one side written in English and the other side in German or in French.
And just to clarify, that's kind of like how Spanish has the same letters as English.
Yeah,
But it
exactly.
is
That
a
would be
different
another-
language.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
the same script, with the same letters, English and Spanish, but totally different words,
Yeah.
and in a column.
Yeah, yeah, and in a column. So we're very excited about that and what that looks like. And as we go through this, what I want to do is talk a little bit first about the tablets themselves and what they look like.
Okay.
So the tablets are, as I said, divided into two columns. On the right-hand side is the Old Babylonian, and we have a relatively large number, we're talking about maybe hundreds, of scholars who can read Old Babylonian with some facility. On the left-hand side is this Northwest Semitic language. Hebrew becomes a Northwest Semitic. It gets localized in there, but at this point, it's actually from the East Semitic world of Babylon, what is today modern southern Iraq. We have this text in Amorite, and nobody's ever seen that in a language like that. As I say, Amorite represents a cluster of languages that lay behind later similar languages found in northern Syria, here in Iraq, what you would call Mesopotamia, and in the area around in Israel and around Israel. And if Abram and Sarah indeed lived at this time, which it seems the Bible suggests, then they spoke a form of this language. Now, previously, there had been no texts ever discovered with writing in Amorite. What we had was texts in Old Babylonian, but in those texts were the names of people, and some of those people, their names were in Amorite. They were Amorite names, but lots of personal names. In fact, you might say maybe as many as 7,000. Quite a few names given, but we're talking about thousands of texts too. And so those were available in Amorite. But having names in that language is not the same as having the language itself.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like your name, Tyler, or my name, Richard. If we have those, it doesn't tell us much about the English language.
No.
In terms of it. And even if you have a name like Smith or something like that, well, you can talk about a metal smith and so forth, but how do you distinguish that from Richard, or, which ones were actually alive and used in the normal speech of that time, which ones were really unknown except as names themselves?
So in other words, we have all these names, but that doesn't necessarily give us a language.
Yeah.
Like Tyler is an English surname for one who tiles roofs, but
Yeah.
but that's
Exactly.
not imported in our language at all.
No, and how would they know say they're tiling roofs as opposed to tilerine roofs?
Right. Why is it a noun
Yeah,
versus a
yeah,
verb? And
yeah, all of those things. So, as I say, the names originate in many of the cities that were prominent at that time and where we've discovered texts. Cities called Alalak and Mari and Akalta, and even Babylon, which is also known in the Bible. These cities are in Turkey and Syria and Iraq today. And texts have been found there from this period of Abraham and Sarah, the 19th century down to the 16th century or 15th century. But as we've also said, such names can only take us a certain distance in understanding the language, but they have been very intensively studied. Let me give you an example of that in the name Abram. Abram is an Amorite name, and we have that in a number of these texts where there's someone usually named Abiram
Yeah.
with the I in there to kind of connect the two.
Okay.
And that name actually has a meaning. It's made up of these two elements, Ab, or Av, and Ram. Now, as you see here, Ab can mean the or my divine father, or simply the common noun father. So it can refer to a God who's called the Father, or it can refer to father simply as a term of relationship.
Hmm.
Ram can mean exalted, can simply mean exalted, somebody who is lifted up or raised or something,
Hmm.
or it can mean a god with the name Ram, an Amorite god. So together, this is probably what you might call a pagan name.
Yeah.
It certainly isn't a name that expresses the faith of the Old Testament. It could mean the divine father, some unnamed god, is exalted.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could mean Ram, the god Ram, that name is father or is my father.
Is Ram a god?
Yeah,
Oh,
Ram
okay.
can also be a god. Yeah. So, but what you see here is clearly we can analyze these elements in this name. We can take a guess at just what the meaning is, pretty close. But what you find is Avram is not a name of somebody who believed in the God of Israel, which, as we will see from the Bible, his family was not believers in the God of Israel.
Huh.
He
Yeah.
developed that belief as God revealed himself to him. So it becomes all the more important to see how this name then gets changed by God
Yeah.
there in Genesis to Avraham, which doesn't any longer have anything to do with a pagan name.
Hmm.
It means father of many peoples.
Hmm.
And so this is a witness to Abram's following God alone, as well as a promise of the legacy that Abram would have
Hmm.
as Avraham. And we see these changes in the name become a means of expressing just this faith in God as God changes it. So, if, as it seems the case, the script on these tablets contains an Amorite language like Abram and Sarah would have spoken, then this is the very first presentation ever, of what we would call an early second millennium BC Amorite language beyond the personal names. This is quite exciting if you realize that, just for scholars of the ancient Near East. But it's also exciting if you actually believe that some of the figures recorded in Genesis and some of the events and things in Genesis may actually date back to this time.
And is the word Abram or Abram, is
Yes.
that in these tablets? Is that
It is not in the two tablets that we're looking at, but it is in many tablets.
Mhm.
Aviram is a name that is found in many tablets in the ancient world from this time. It is
Okay.
the name of a person, not Avram, not the Avram of the Bible, but it shows it's like a name. My first name is Richard or Rick, and there are many Richards around. But and if you were to examine all the texts from this time, you would find many. So it shows that this was a common name used at that time. And names like this change. They don't remain the same. Some names do more or less extend down for hundreds, even thousands of years, but other names really change. And in Israel, once Israel becomes a nation and the years that follow, you don't have the name Avram. Nobody's called Avram. They knew of their ancestor Avram, but they didn't use that name. It's only when you get much later into the Hellenistic, the Christian period, the second and first centuries BC, and then into first and second century AD. Once we move into that time, people begin to use that name, but not in the times of the Old Testament itself and the monarchy and David and Solomon and Josiah and so forth.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. Sometimes these names can tell us something about just when these things were written. The thing, of course, for us is that we want to learn more than just the names, and now these tablets give us the opportunity to do that. And so that's what we want to do to look at the content of these tablets.
So these content of these tablets help us establish that Abraham meant like a father highly exalted.
Yeah, well, what they do is they show us that names like elements of the name, like father and other similar elements, are not just found in the names,
Right.
but that they may also be found in the actual writing.
Interesting.
As we'll
Okay.
see, and we'll see some of that in these texts as we go into them.
Good.
So I think here is a good place for us to pause, and then we'll pick up next time with actually looking at the contents of these tablets and seeing what we can learn a little bit more about Abraham and Sarah and the world they came from and what that looks like.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for watching.